That should be it. Okay, there you
All
go,
right.
Chuck.
Looks good. So this is the November 5th, 2020 meeting of the Historic Preservation Advisory Board, and will now come to order. So this meeting will be held virtually. Information on how to participate in the virtual meeting has been posted on the Historic Preservation Advisory Board webpage. And at this point, I would ask, do we have any members of the general public attending? Don't hear any, so we will shortcut a little bit of it, but so I won't bother with a roll call. Jessica's pretty much already recorded that for the record. And I believe that we should probably, for the record, record the staff members that are present.
Sure, this is Jessica Fasik with the Community Planning and Permitting.
I can go. This is Molly Marcaselli. I'm also with Community Planning and Permitting. I'm covering for Denise Grimm tonight.
Thank you.
And I am Melanie Wilkerson. I am the administrative technician for Community Planning and Permitting.
Hannah Hipley, also here from CPMP.
Okay. And I see Carol, or I did see her, so we should be.
Yeah, Carol being part of open space.
All righty. Did I miss anybody that would like to be on the record? Other than HPAB members who Jessica generally records. So let's see. So the first item on the agenda is citizen participation for items not otherwise on the agenda. Previously, I did not hear from any members of the public, but in case people are listening or intended to join later, we have two presentations, one from Parks and Open Space and one regarding the Gross Reservoir expansion. And you are certainly welcome to listen if you are from the public. However, no comments will be taken for the record. Okay, where am I at here? Okay, so next item on the agenda, staff was very busy and was not able to complete the minutes due to all of our COVID problems, et cetera. So we now have minutes for the July 2nd meeting. There was no August meeting. We have minutes for the September meeting, and there was no October meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes that were in the packet? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I motion that we approve the minutes from the September meeting and the, oh no, what's the other one?
July.
And the July meeting of 2020.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Thank you. So now the next item is a not really a public hearing, rather a presentation of and discussion by HPAB members on the management plan update for the Carolyn Holmberg Preserve at Rock Creek Farm. And it was going to be presented by Marnie, who is busy, and so Jeff Moline will be taking her place. And go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you members for hearing us. Yeah, my name is Jeff Moline, so I'm the Resource Planning Manager in our Parks and Open Space Department, and I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited that Carol is here with me so she can help address specific questions about cultural resources at Rock Creek Farm. But this is the first time that our department has presented a proposed management plan for one of our properties to HPAB, and both Carol and I feel like this is a great one for us to start with as a presentation to you and to get your feedback on. Rock Creek Farm, as you'll hear tonight, is one of our longest held open space properties, but also one that has a lot of very rich cultural resources and history associated with it. So we're just excited to share the plan, the draft plan with you, and this presentation with you. And we look forward to any comments and questions you might have this evening. So I'm going to share my screen here. I have a presentation that again, I'm subbing for Marnie. I think this is running about 30 slides, and we're a small group, so feel free to, if you're comfortable, feel free to stop me and ask me questions as we go through the presentation. I'm going to talk just for a little bit about just the general planning process itself, give you some basics about Rock Creek Farm, and then we'll dig into the stuff that might be of more interest to you associated with cultural resources. And Carol will chime in. I hope she will feel free to chime in if I need help on the cultural resources side. So here we go. Let's see here. Did that work?
Looks good.
Looks good. Okay. And it's advancing. We're on to the next slide.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you. All right, I won't keep asking now. So again, we're thrilled to be here and letting you know about this. For those of you that aren't aware of what a management planning process is, it's really our department's chance to share with the public what we're planning to do on a particular property. Oftentimes we do these planning processes on properties that haven't been open to the public. And so there's a lot of interest in where our trail is going to go. How are you going to protect cultural resources? How are you going to protect wildlife resources? In this particular instance, we've owned this property for almost 50 years almost 40 years. And so we've had previous management plans on this particular property. However, they do take a while. And so we started the internal scoping, we call it. There are some conflict, some resource conflict issues on this property that we need to address. And so in the later part of last year, we started looking at what are those resource issues that we keep having some problems with, what's working, what isn't working, do we have some information we need to gather or not? And then right before the county went into the first COVID kind of lockdown stages in March, we had our initial public comment open house. And so we heard from the public about what some of their concerns were about Rock Creek Farm, what's working well, what isn't working. And then after that, we've moved into developing the plan after getting some initial feedback. And now we've developed the draft plan, and now we're reviewing it with the public. It's been out on and available for review on our website for several weeks now. And then we're moving into some other hearings, and later this fall we'll have a POSAC hearing and a board hearing. And so this is just sort of the typical management planning process that we undertake here at Boulder County for open space. In this particular update, in the document itself, we talk about some of these previous planning efforts. Chapter 2 is the one where we detail what resources are found on the property, and in the case of an update, if anything has changed. The last update for this property was done in 2002. And so if there's changes in uses that we need to address. And then chapter 3 is really the meat of the document, and that's where you'll see the detailed recommendations that we have for 13 planning issues that we identified through the scoping process and through our interdisciplinary team review of the old document and the new information. And then the plan has some other chapters that are important to capture: how we presented the plan, what kind of comments we heard, and then of course a glossary and then some appendices as well. So probably many of you are familiar with the property itself. We're talking about the very southeast corner of Boulder County. We're between 104th Street and US 287, south of Dillon Road. There's a portion of the property that extends west of 104th Street over to Brainerd Drive. You can imagine in 1980, things looked a little different out in this part of the county. But at that time, this was a really important purchase for our program. Even by 1980, it was becoming clear that some of the Denver, Boulder suburban communities were growing rapidly. And so this was one of our big first plains purchases that was intended to try and keep some community buffer, some land between communities so that communities could retain some independence and uniqueness and not just sprawl into each other. And so that was one of the intents of our purchase. Of course, another one was the preservation of agricultural land, which already in the 70s and 80s, and of course on through the 90s into the present day, we've continued to lose agricultural land in the county to development. And this property was important in the southeast part of the county for preserving some of those agricultural lands. In addition, we recognized also with the purchase of this property that we were acquiring some very important cultural resources. Some of those we didn't realize at the time. Some of the prehistoric resources, we weren't aware of how rich this property is with those, but we knew that it had some important historic resources. And so that was also important in our purchase and protection of this property. Some other key things about the property: we lease the bulk of the property to an agricultural tenant. That's Miller Farms. So they run the agricultural operation on the property. We also lease a portion of the property to the Birds of Prey Foundation, and they have a facility, if you can see my cursor, at the south end of South 104th Street. They have a facility down here where they recover and rehabilitate injured birds of prey. All right. One of the other things we'll get more into is the property does have some critical environmental resources and also some oil and gas wells. I've got some slides that lay that stuff out in greater specifics. So that's just a little bit of an introduction to the property. Again, for those of you that aren't familiar with our program, Boulder County Parks and Open Space, our program has been around since 1975. We've acquired upwards of 100,000 acres of land in the county for open space preservation. Roughly 60,000 of those acres are ones that we own outright. And some of that is leased for agricultural use. And of course, that's true for this property here. And so you can see our mission and the vision, so that our department's vision kind of translates into this vision statement for Rock Creek Farm. And this vision statement just reiterates what I've been saying already. This is an important property for lots of different values here in our program and for the county. All right, just talking, giving you a little sense of cultural resources. One of the things that's true for a lot of properties in our system right now is not very much of the property has actually been surveyed to examine what cultural resources are present there. And that is also true for Rock Creek Farm. In fact, we're actually sort of lucky that at least 39% of the property has been surveyed. We have a number, and Carol can say how many, but many properties that we haven't had the ability to do any cultural survey. So at least we've done some survey of this property. Some of those surveys, as Carol would probably note, are maybe reaching the end of their life. So you'll see when we get to recommendations, that's one of the things is talking about in the future, trying to do more resource surveys for this property. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So in this map, we're just displaying some of the resources that we know are out there. The linear features are historic railroads or spurs. The Burlington Northern Railroad actually still is an active line. This one that, if you can see my cursor, this one that traverses through the southeast part of the property and then crosses over to 287. Believe it or not, that's still an active line with about, I don't know, a weekly train. But there are, as I mentioned before, there are some other important resources on the property, both prehistoric and historic. A lot of those historic resources and actually prehistoric are clustered over here on the east side of the property. And for those of you that were able to attend the site visit, you know that that's where a lot of those buildings are located. Some of the other resources include some ditch segments. The Goodhue Ditch you can see here, it traverses through the property as well. The property does include some nationally and locally important agricultural land, and actually quite a bit of the land is included. One of the things I noticed just today actually is this quarter section up here in the northwest portion of the property, I believe is probably also nationally important agricultural land. However, at the time that we did the comprehensive plan mapping for agricultural land of importance, this area was incorporated into the town of Louisville, and so we don't we don't have that information updated in the comp plan yet. But my sense is that this area would meet the criteria for nationally important agricultural land as well. So the next time we go through an update of the ag map, we'll probably make that change now that that is no longer an incorporated part of Louisville. Coupled
Jeff,
with the, oh yeah.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please do.
What is the criteria for setting an area as a nationally important agricultural land?
Great question. The criteria relate to the soil conditions. So you have to have a soil series that is that qualifies as being one that meets some agricultural criteria. So, for example, a very sandy soil that doesn't have a lot of loamy material would probably not reach that level of national quality. And then the other factor that's important is the ability to irrigate the property as well. And so you can see on this map, the areas in green, you can tell that there are that there are irrigation ditches present on the property. And so a nationally important land has both the important soil qualities and resources along with the ability to have irrigation water. So that's what elevates it. I'm probably not able to go into I'm probably not able to explain any further about the soils other than that. So.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, you bet. Good question. Keep them coming, and just butt in because I don't know that I'll be able to see you guys. So just holler or raise your hand, and then Carol or Jessica can holler at me. So this is some of the natural resource values that are found on the property. I didn't mention earlier that Rock Creek flows through the property here. You can see that. There's also a tributary to Rock Creek called Buffalo Gulch, and that starts down here in this real skinny southern part of the property, and then meets Rock Creek but just before it leaves the property here. So those two areas, Buffalo Gulch and Rock Creek, are the ones that tend to have obviously more of the wetland and riparian resources. This portion of the property that's south of the railroad tracks is a native grassland that has never been plowed, and so is actually a fairly nice vegetative resource area. And so you can see that it has some noted significant natural communities on it. There are also some wetland communities on this southern portion of the property. I should also mention this is a property that's important for recreation, and this is a pretty good map to see the trail system here. This is a portion of the Rock Creek Coal Creek Trail system, so about 3 miles of that 25-mile system across through Rock Creek Farm here. let's see. Yeah, so there's about almost 6 miles of riparian corridors present on the property. This map goes into way more detail than I'm going to spend right now on the significant, unique vegetative communities, and you can see those are especially located in that area that had never been cultivated before south of the railroad tracks. We also have some important vegetative and unique vegetative communities over here on the west side of the property.
How do you know it's never been cultivated? Is it because those plants are still there, or is there other ways to tell?
You know, I must say I'm relying a little bit on the expertise of our agricultural staff, but I think it's exactly what you just mentioned, is that because like once a native prairie that has a large assemblage of plants, including a variety of native grasses, and especially lots of forbs, so annual plants that aren't grasses. Once those areas are tilled and cultivated, it's really hard to bring that level of diversity back to a restored site. So our plant ecologists and range conservationists can usually tell that if they're seeing these kinds of communities out there, along with this wider diversity of vegetative, or excuse me, of other plants, they can be pretty certain that it was never cultivated. And part of the reason we know that is in areas where that were previously cultivated and we're trying to restore grasslands to them, it's really hard to bring back a huge assemblage of native prairie plants. It's easy to bring back some of the grasses, or I shouldn't say easy, but we've got that kind of figured out. But to bring back, 50, 100 different kinds of prairie plants to a site is really challenging. And so I think it's through the diversity of these communities is how our staff can tell that it's never been plowed or disturbed significantly. So
Got it. Thanks.
all right. Yeah, good. Again, great questions. So yeah, this property does also contain some important critical wildlife habitat. Those are centered around the riparian areas. Again, you can see here. Again, this property has been farmed for many, many, many years, but it has also retained some natural resource values that are important for wildlife. This parcel up here in the kind of north central part of the property is sort of interesting. This was an area, this is about 40-acre parcel. This was not cultivated, or excuse me, it was probably cultivated in the past, but it wasn't cultivated extensively at the time we acquired it. And after we acquired it, some burrowing owls had actually started to nest periodically there on the property. They're migrating. They're one of our migrating owls, and so this portion of the property was set aside to protect those burrowing owls. I don't think we've seen nesting there for, I want to say, at least 10 years, and because of some prairie dog management challenges that are in this property, surrounded by otherwise agricultural lands, we're making a recommendation to change the designation of this property and turn that portion into agricultural land again, and do some designations down in the southwestern part of the property that would consolidate wildlife habitat there. If you want, we could talk for a long time about that, maybe later if there's more questions about that. I just wanted to touch base just briefly on oil and gas. Again, not knowing how new you are to county open space. Oftentimes when we buy open space, the mineral rights have already been, what they say, severed from the surface ownership. And so we oftentimes don't have the ability to acquire those rights. Sometimes a portion of those rights comes with the surface interest. And so you can see on this property here, We did end up with some of the mineral rights that came with our purchase of the property. But then you can see there's also plenty of the property where we own some of the minerals, but not all of the mineral rights. Oftentimes when we purchase the property, it also already has existing leases, oil and gas leases on it. And so, we take ownership of the property subject to those oil and gas leases. And that is true in this case. And you can see there's still a few producing wells. Some have been abandoned, but there is still some oil and gas activity out at this property.
Do you have a program to make sure that those abandoned wells don't leak, and or on the producing ones that the fugitive emissions are being kept under control?
We would rely on the other county or the county's overall oil and gas regulations to ensure that. So our staff, in other words, we don't have staff. We have real estate staff that keep track of the leasing and the our mineral ownership interests, but we don't currently have the staff that are out monitoring the wells, if that's what you're asking.
Well, kind of, as long as somebody's doing it, that was my concern.
Yeah, yep. Yeah. All right, so this is the kind of agricultural field map for the property. I won't spend a lot of time on this. You can just see that the property is divided roughly into two areas. The bluer area are the irrigated, more intensively farmed portions of the property, and the green areas are rangeland. And so our tenant does both cultivated cropland agriculture along with has a livestock operation as well. I already talked about this, so I won't spend too much time. I guess one of the things I would point out here is that Stearns Lake is, and actually Rock Creek Farm has become a fairly popular property, partly because of its proximity to a lot of residents in Broomfield, Erie, Lafayette, Louisville. And so you can go out here in an nice evening, and there's lots of people from Broomfield that make their way, walk their dogs, walk over to Stearns Lake. So this property gets a lot of use just from nearby residents, and then on the weekends, it gets all kinds of recreational use. Lots of people using the regional trail. Excuse me. And then there's also a good component of people fishing that do fishing at Stearns Lake. Another thing that you probably saw at our site visit is the Goodhue Farmhouse. And so while our tenant uses a lot of those agricultural buildings there, we do have a house that Carol could talk about maybe in some detail if we wanted her to, about the Goodhue house that the county did a lot of work on. And we now have that available for other county departments to conduct meetings at as well. So that's an important component of use at this site. I already mentioned the birds of prey, and if you got to go on the site visit, you got to see some of their flight cages on the east side of the property.
Jeffrey, could I ask a question?
Please.
This is Larry Powers. The tenant is at Rock Creek Farm. What is their term? What's their lease like? Is it like 20 years, 30 years, or is it shorter term? Or
that's a great question. Usually the terms of our leases are usually run about 3 years. And you'd think I would know this. I was working in the ag division for a little bit several years ago. I don't know, there's some taxation and some ownership interest, and with the county we try and do annual leases, renew them annually, again for some taxation purposes, but generally those can be renewed on periods of 3 years. And so generally we have tenants that lease for those 3 years, and then they have the ability to renew. And if we, as a staff, feel like the tenant has done a good job of managing the land, we're inclined to then renew them again for another 3 years. So I think in this case, the Miller Farm operation has been down there for nearly 20 years. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I knew they had been there a long time, and I don't want to jump the gun. I'm sure you have cultural stuff coming up soon, or
I do. I'll maybe I'll see if I can speed it up a little bit.
no. That's fine. I just didn't.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the material that we were reading, and it
Sure.
talked about how you guys weren't really sure what kind of operation, in terms of how it could affect cultural stuff. But I can wait.
Okay. Yeah. Please jump in when the time feels right for you. This is just some numbers. Every 5 years, we do an extensive visitor study of our whole program. And we also do look at numbers more frequently than that. And that's what you can see at the bottom there. But we do an extensive visitor survey every 5 years and find out a little bit more about what people are enjoying about a property, what they don't like, those kinds of things. But we're getting really good visitation. Really good visitation numbers out at this property, and high numbers for us, high numbers of people fishing. All right, so that's a little bit of background about the resources that are on the site. As I mentioned earlier, our interdisciplinary team of folks in our department then discussed earlier in the spring what are some of the issues, what are some of the resource conflicts that we've been seeing in the last number of years. And these were the issues that the staff team and the public highlighted as things that we should try and resolve and make some recommendations for some management changes and updates to. So I'm assuming you probably want to talk mostly about the cultural and resources and kind of the use of the historic buildings, and a little bit maybe on recreation and visitor access. I'm happy to talk about more of these things if you'd like, but maybe for now we'll jump into the cultural stuff, and then if you have questions that afterwards, after we get done with that, we can talk about some of these other things. So. Let's see here. Whoop, what did I do? What happened? Huh. Wow, my screen kind of froze. Huh. Let me try and reshare, okay?
Okay.
Let's see here. Did it come back?
Yes, it did.
All right, now let's hope I can have control of it and move it. Yay, okay. Did it move?
Yes.
Oh, good. All right, some of these great pictures are probably the result of some research that Carol has done. So look at, that's a beauty of the house from a long time ago, the Goodhue farmhouse. So again, we talked about those existing resources. This gives you a little bit more detail about what those resources are. And one of the ones I can speak about a little bit in terms of the prehistoric sites. The Rock Creek Farm site is, well, I don't know if that's the one pictured here, but that was one that was when the US 287 was being widened in I think the early 2000s, they had done some, I believe they had done some research on and had some surveys done in the areas near where they were going to be expanding the bridge over Rock Creek, and they actually found some material there. And then since after that, it became a site that really had some really nice cultural resources. And I really am going to have to let Carol talk more about that because she might have more details. Then you can see there's also the other 18 historic sites there, including the ditch segments, the railroad segments, coal mine, and then the Stearns Dairy and Rock Creek Farm complex of buildings on the east side of the property. Carol, would you want to say anything more?
You're right, Jeff. That photo that's showing is from the 1990s Rock Creek Farm site excavation. That was a large excavation in the early 1990s. So that's why the photo looks old, because it is old from the 1990s.
Yeah. But an important find. That was an important site. Yeah.
Oh, extremely important. That's why it's listed on the State Register of Historic Properties. It's certainly eligible for the National Register of Historic Places as well, but I'm not quite sure why the county never went to the next level and went to the National Register. So that was before my time, but it's certainly listed on the State Register and, you know, eligible for the National Register. And it was a multiple year excavation out there with a tremendous amount of public education element, taking school groups out there, taking the public out there to see the active excavation. And in our building, because we are a state approved repository for archaeological materials collected on open space, I have in that room, in our archives room, 8 boxes of materials that were removed from that site.
Wow.
Back in the 1990s, you know, we didn't have our building, so most materials from excavations would go up to CU.
Okay.
And once the department got its building in, when did we get the building? 2005, something like that?
Yeah. Yep.
You have a locked and climate controlled storage area, and we became a state approved repository for archaeological materials excavated off open space. And once we became that approved repository, I went knocking up at CU and said, can we have that stuff back from Rock Creek? And they were more than happy to give it back to us.
Yeah.
Yep.
A very nice, yes, a really nice set of artifacts for us to have. So yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think it was over like 7,000 artifacts were extracted out of that excavation over multiple
Oh my
years.
gosh.
It was huge.
Wow. All right. I guess I'll go on. Let's see. Oh yeah, we were also wanted to share with you some of the highlights of things that we've done from a historic preservation perspective. Gosh, Carol, do you want to mention anything here?
Nope, this was actually my first project when I came to the county. So, you know, it was kind of a whirlwind, but what a magnificent project to start your career out. So it was the derelict Goodhue farmhouse on the left photo. And then of course, on the right is the after. And I mean, derelict is the most appropriate word to describe the condition the craftsman style house was in at that time. There were holes in the roof. You could see daylight. The inside of the house was hacked up into like little quarters. You know, the original floor plan had been completely destroyed to hack it up into like individual independent living quarters in there. The windows were boarded up. It was quite the freak house when I got there.
Was that a grant? Did we get some grants to help with that?
It was both the county, the county commissioners stepped up to the plate. I'm sure Rich Koopman, you know, pitched the idea of the adaptive reuse to make it into a public meeting facility. So he went to the county commissioners and they coughed up the cash, and then the state historical fund kicked in a measly like $60,000 for the project. And the downtown county construction crews did the bulk majority of the work. Some of it was subbed out, but it turned out to be a very magnificent, project, and completely, people just love going in that house and having meetings.
Yep. Wonderful place.
Were the birds of prey on that side at one point? I remember visiting the site. I thought they were on the other side instead of over by Stearns Lake, where they had their flights and everything.
Yeah, they're in both places actually. That's a great point. They have I think they utilize some of the other buildings just off to actually to the right of this image here of the farmhouse. So they utilize a couple of smaller buildings, I believe, and then the flight cages are off to the left-hand side of this, if you were looking at this building west facing like we are here, off to the south to the left are the large flight cages. And those are, so they have some facilities on this side of the property, and then their intensive care unit, and then their caretaker residence is on the east side. I'm sorry, on the west side of off of 105th Street, 4th Street, jeepers. Sorry. Yeah. We just, we were talking about this the other day about this painting contract, and but Carol and our staff had recognized that we needed to make sure that our buildings were looking good, and so we in 2019 spent a considerable amount of money and had many of the buildings on this east side painted. So, and they look great. And then, of course, you all in HPAB probably know this, but we have a whole historic preservation and buildings crew, and their job, and we're so fortunate to have these guys. This is sort of this crack team of ours that does historically correct in all the sort of National Park Service ways, repairs to buildings. And so we're so lucky to have a group of guys on our staff that can keep these old buildings in shape and functioning for tenants in some cases, and that's true to some extent down here at Rock Creek Farm. So just touching again on some of the things that some management direction issues for this property in terms of cultural resources. We talked a little bit about we don't have as complete a survey kind of information as we'd like to have for this property. And then Carol had scheduled a presentation by Dr. Dino from down at the Museum of Nature and Science in Denver, and she arranged for him to do some investigations paleontologically on some of the property, and he found some sort of exciting stuff. And so that's another element of what we could see happening out there. Oh, look at that. There. So I guess these are some of the things that had been recovered from the general area. I don't know if these came off of Rock Creek Farm or an adjoining property, but this is some of the material that paleontologically can be found in the area. Fossils, dino fossils.
Well, that kind of leads me back to my earlier question.
Sure.
So a class 3 survey has never been done. A walking survey has never been done of most of the property, right?
Right.
And there was a mention that, so we don't know what agriculturally is going on and what it could be doing to existing resources. Is that correct?
Right. Only that, it's been going on for 100 and some years.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, have they ever discovered stuff and brought it to your attention? Or is that how you're getting stuff, or?
We'll have to check in with Carol on that. I don't know that our tenants have said, "Oh yeah, we found something." I'm not aware that they've ever said that.
Correct. I've never had the Millers come to me in my career here, nor have I heard Rich Koopman, the previous resource planning manager, discuss the finds that the Millers had discovered on the property. So you're correct, Larry.
I know we all got that written statement from a member of the public.
Yeah.
And they were concerned about the indigenous ancestral lands, and what's the plan for that?
Yeah. So let me talk about that for a second too. Let me just say first off, I thought the comments were fantastic. I'm glad we got those. And I thought they were important. They're important for us to consider and to think about. We have not reached out to tribal governments, but and with respect to their thoughts about this management plan. And what I think I can safely say this. I've been affiliated with the county for, I don't know, 25 years or something. I don't believe we've ever formally consulted with the tribes, any tribal organizations for any of our management plans. I think I would say that our department's awareness of those sorts of things is rapidly growing. Maybe not as quickly as some people would hope, but I think we're trying to take some initial steps to doing this. And I think adding the land acknowledgement, especially for this really significant property in terms of its cultural resources, we felt it was a very important first step. I will also say that we're going to be working with a consultant that helped develop CSU's land acknowledgement and went through I think she mentioned a year-long process to do that for CSU. And so we're likely to, it's very possible we might revise our land acknowledgement statement as we move through our own land acknowledgement process. So that's a little bit of response to that comment.
Well, it was good that was in your proposed what's going on, what's going to happen. But
Yeah.
what happens at a well site though? I mean, who wins that? The mineral owner is going to say what's going to happen below surface, or?
You mean like just from an oil and gas perspective now?
Well, see if there were cultural objects over there.
Yeah, that's a good. I don't know. I am not up to speed on the county's new kind of oil and gas regulations, so I'm not sure I can answer that exactly. I mean, I sure would hope that there could be some sort of a survey of a site before there was any sort of site disturbance. So I would sure hope that that would be true for oil and gas. New surface disturbance. And I guess maybe if I could add just one more thing. I realize I'm taking up a lot of you guys' time here. If I could just add one more thing, I think one of the things that's exciting about Rock Creek Farm is that there are those important cultivated areas, but if you recall one of those maps, there's a lot of rangeland, and including that stuff that's never been cultivated. So there is a lot of ground at Rock Creek Farm that hasn't had extensive disturbance. And I think that's exciting in terms of what could be there culturally and paleontologically. So that's maybe some good news about Rock Creek Farm and cultural resources. So, all right, I feel like I should maybe move on here. So here's the statement that we included in the document. And as I said, I think we look at it as kind of our initial first step, and we'll kind of continue to refine that. All right, so here are, I think the next few slides are going to go over some of the recommendations that we have, and so you can see part of the side of this is working on some additional survey and resource assessments, doing some archaeology assessments of both the prehistoric site and historic site, developing a plan, the maintenance of the buildings, and some other things, which I'm not going to read all of those. But one of the things on that list also referred to the agricultural use of the buildings and structures. We're always excited when we can have a tenant that is able to utilize one of our existing buildings. At the same time, we are disappointed if the tenant's use of those buildings results in their damage. So that's something that Carol has been working really hard on our agricultural properties to try and ensure that we have these protected and that they're used, but they're used in a way that doesn't result in their disrepair. And so Carol's been working on looking for ways to formalize some agreements with tenants so that they're that it's more kind of in their face. You need to take care of these buildings and you need to be careful with your use of them. Some of that would also flow into some standard operating procedures that would also become in some cases part of our lease agreement with the tenants, so that it's again in black and white their responsibilities for maintaining these buildings and making sure that they don't damage them unduly. One of the challenges is that buildings that were built 100 years ago don't often convert over well with today's massive agricultural equipment. And so that's sort of the dance and tension that we have to play, is trying to figure out ways to adaptively reuse the buildings with modern equipment. And so anyway, that's kind of the tension that we play with tenants on some of our properties. So I have a few slides here about trails and trailheads, but I'm going to say maybe I should turn it over to see if there are other questions, unless you want to talk more about some of the other specific things. We do, I guess maybe one other slide I could show is we have considered, this is zooming in, apologies, I just sort of zoomed into a part of the property here. This is a western part of the property with Brainerd Drive here. One of the old historic railroad alignments that's shown in orange here, we've considered that as a potential place where we would maybe have a trail. So that is one other thing that I wanted to raise in case you all had thoughts about that. But other than that, I'm just moving ahead here because I'm looking at the time. I think that's really kind of it for cultural resources. So this is sort of the next steps for our process. We're here with you tonight. We go to POSAC in a couple weeks, and then the board in December. So with that, I'm happy to go back on any of the slides. Any questions? I could also stop sharing if you'd like. I appreciate your patience, and I appreciated your thoughtful questions and comments, and would love to hear if you have any more.
I would like to know, so 61% of the property hasn't been surveyed. Is the plan to connect future surveys with other projects? Like if we're going to be, or if the county is planning to put in a trail on the western side of the property, would you be doing a survey in conjunction with that?
That is a great question, and I think you're right. Whenever we do ground disturbing activities, be it trail construction, forestry, fire recovery now, whenever we do those kinds of activities, our staff usually ropes Carol into doing some assessments for us, and then if and I'm going to speak for her here, but she knows she can interrupt me if she needs to. That if we feel like we're at a place where we need to hire outside consulting help to do a more in-depth survey, we'll do that. So, for example, if we were to do some new trail construction, Carol would do some assessments and then help us determine, oh, you know what, we're going to need to get a full-blown survey for that particular area. And then you're right, we might look for ways to then say to ourselves, well, if we're doing this trail corridor, geez, we may as well do this, 40 acres of the property. So we do look for those win-wins if we have the money and the availability and those kinds of things. And Carol knows she can jump in and correct me if I'm speaking wrong.
Well, yeah, you did a great job, Jeff, and it's a great question, and that's in one of my recommendations that isn't shown here, but certainly in the internal documents in terms of doing a complete class 3 intensive level survey on the entire property to have it in one document and not multiple documents. So that has been my big request to come out of this for cultural resources, whether that project, because it's going to be expensive to do that property with 1,124 acres, if I remember correctly. So so I shot for the moon, and that's what I put in my request to have done in the short-term period, not long-term. But we'll see if that gets funded to hire a consulting firm to do a complete class 3 on that property and do away with the antiquated, outdated, in ad hoc information that I've been fumbling with out on that property. So hopefully, funding will come through. And if the funding doesn't come through, like Jeff said, I go out, no matter how small the project is, for any disturbances to hopefully, mitigate any effects that our ground disturbance projects will have. So we got a Band-Aid approach, and we got, the sky's the limit approach.
And Jason Emery has his hand raised.
Jeffrey, thank you for that presentation.
Jason, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, say again there, Jason, please. We didn't quite catch what you were saying.
Any chance you can hear me now?
Pretty poor.
Very quiet, and there's a lag. But if you type it, one of us could read it out loud.
This better?
Not much better. If you can type it out in the conversation section, maybe one of us can read it out loud for you. I think that you have a pretty bad internet connection.
Now better?
Slightly.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, now he froze.
I'll let it go.
Okay, sorry.
Jeffrey, do you guys have to deal with the Corps of Engineers very much with the waterways?
We do when we do work in stream settings. So yeah, and then also the county's own floodplain permitting group. Yep.
So I think at this point, I want to thank Jeff for an excellent presentation with Carol's add-ons. And I would like to hear from board members if they, other than the comments they've made, which have been recorded and obviously will be in the minutes, if they have any comments that we want to make as a formal recommendation to the next level, which is the POSAC. If so, let's have those now. If not, we will move on.
So I really liked what Carol said about trying to urge the county commissioners to put aside budget to do a full survey of this property. And if there's anything that we can do to get behind that, I would be in favor of putting our voice behind Carol for that.
Sounds like a good recommendation to me. Do I have a motion to carry that forward officially? We have one. Do I have a second?
I could second that. I think it's a great idea.
Yes, so do I. And so are any present members opposed? If so, we'll make that a formal recommendation moving forward.
That's great.
Agree.
I also wanted to say that I appreciate that the county is making, I mean, it's not concessions really, but is at least thinking about Indigenous people's history here, and I wish that we could do more, but I also think that it would be wonderful to tell the county commissioners that we are behind that as well.
Great.
Sure. I think we can carry that along with, since I hear no objections.
Yeah.
Agree.
So are there any further comments for the record on the managed plan, which I think was an excellent presentation, incidentally. Thank you.
Oh yeah, thanks you guys. I really, yeah, I appreciated your thoughtful comments and questions, and this was just the first time. So the next time we do a management plan and it has a good connection to, you know, like a landmark or historic resources, we'll be back so we can get your feedback. So yeah, thank you very much.
Sounds good.
All right.
So if there are no further comments, then we'll close the public presentation on the management plan and move on to Docket SI-20-0003, which is regarding the Gross Reservoir and dam expansion. And again, I would remind people, if there are any members of the general public, is that this board is not taking any public comments. However, you are more than welcome to listen. And so we will listen to a presentation, and then either during it or afterwards add any comments that HPAB members would like to make regarding this. Regarding the cultural resources part of it, it's unfortunately not in our purview to address the overall plan. So with that, whoever would like to take it from staff, please introduce yourself and move forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Molly Marcaselli. I am a planner with Community Planning and Permitting, and I'll be presenting this on behalf of Denise Grimm, who is currently out of town. So I will do my best. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you guys, or when you see the presentation. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yeah, we can see it.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, the purpose of this presentation tonight is basically to request some referral comments from HPAB on this application that was submitted to Community Planning and Permitting. And it's for the expansion of the Gross Reservoir and Gross Dam.
Does anyone else see can't display content, or is that just me?
No, that's me too.
Okay.
Oh.
Can everyone else see it, or?
Yeah.
Yes,
I
I
can,
can see it.
I can try and unshare and share again if you want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you might try that.
Okay.
Turn it off.
Okay.
Lost the connection. Oh, there I am.
Okay, how about now?
I lost the whole world. I don't know if that was on my end or someone. There's the presentation. Got it.
No, mine's still not displaying, but I can follow along. That's all right.
Yeah, me neither, but I'll follow along. It's fine.
Okay, are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so yeah, just a little background. So the type of application that was submitted to Community Planning and Permitting is called a 1041 application. And currently it's in the referral period, and that's where the planner assigned to the application basically sends the application out to different referral bodies to basically get their expertise and request any comments they may have on the application. And then the planner will send those back to the applicant. And so HPAB is considered a referral agency. And so that's why we're here tonight. We are seeking comments from HPAB as a referral agency on this project as it relates to cultural and historic resources, which, as you'll see in a few slides, there's a few cultural resources that will be impacted by this project. And I think you guys know, but just a reminder, no public comment is going to be taken at this meeting. We're simply just requesting comments on this application. And I just wanted to quickly go over a little background on the 1041 process. So we have the 1041 application and requirements are all outlined in our land use code in Article 8. And the name comes from Colorado House Bill 1041, which essentially allowed local governments to regulate any development proposals that the county designates as areas or activities of state interest. And this includes large infrastructure projects. Those fall into this category. And so that's why this application, that's why the applicant basically needed to submit a 1041 application. And when the county reviews these applications, they're examining impacts to different kinds of resources, and that includes cultural, historic, natural, archaeological, things like that. And so again, HPAB's role is really just to serve as a referral body for this, and just review the project and its impact on cultural and historic resources. And so there are several standards for approval laid out in our land use code that the application needs to meet in order to be approved. And so this criterion number 7 speaks directly to impacts to cultural and historic resources. So again, what we're asking is just for you to consider the impacts of this project on the cultural and historic resources that I'll be outlining in a few slides. And again, we're just seeking comments and really a reaction to this project, not so much looking for an approval or a decision point or anything like that. So I'm going to get a little bit into the project details, and just a disclaimer, I'm not an expert in historic preservation or on this particular project, so I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. There are other staff here to help answer any questions I may not know the answer to, and I believe the applicants are here too. I'm not sure if they've actually joined, but if there's anything that's unclear, any inaccuracies that I present, hopefully they can clear that up. And I think someone else started sharing their screen. I don't know if you guys see that.
Yeah, I'm currently
I
seeing
see that.
Casey Keen's calls. Does anybody know a Casey Keen and can stop sharing their screen?
I think it's Jason. Is that yours?
Yeah, looks like it's Jason.
I think I can steal it back. 1 second.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, it's
Can you
back.
guys see the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay. Oops. Okay, so yeah, just a quick project overview. As I said, it's a 1041 application to expand the Gross Reservoir and the Gross Dam. They are proposing to add an additional 77,000 acre-feet of storage volume, and that's going to entail increasing the height of the dam by about 130 feet, increasing the length of the dam by about 790 feet, and the spillway elevation by approximately 126 feet. And so this is just a basic aerial photo of the reservoir as it currently exists. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but the dam is right there. And so I believe you guys are familiar with what an area of potential effects is, but basically that red perimeter is the area of potential effects. And so there were a couple surveys done that basically evaluated the impacts of this project within that area. And so the two surveys that are relevant for our presentation tonight were the cultural survey and the environmental impact statement. And so the cultural survey that was done found that there were several cultural resources that are eligible to be listed on the National Register. But of those cultural resources, the environmental impact statement found that the ones highlighted, the resumption flume, the Gross Dam, and the reservoir, were the only ones that would be adversely impacted by this project. And so to address that, Denver Water, who's the applicant, has signed on to 2 programmatic agreements, which basically will take into account the impact that the project is going to have on these resources and memorialize agreed upon mitigation efforts. And that's going to require detailed documentation of these resources with the HARE documentation. And then there's also going to be a historic properties management plan as well. And so a lot of most of these photos are from the application, just so you guys know. But I wanted to include this table in here just so you could see a comparison between the existing size of the reservoir and the dam versus the proposed. And so, as I said in the previous slides, they're adding an additional 77,000 acre-feet of additional storage volume. So that storage volume is going to go from, it's going to increase from 42,000 acre-feet to 119,000 acre-feet. The normal water surface elevation is going to increase from 7,282 feet above mean sea level to 7,406. The surface area of the reservoir is going to a little bit more than double. And they're going to raise the dam by about 130 feet. So currently the height is 340 feet. With that added 130 feet, it's going to be 471 feet. And then the dam crest length will increase from 1,050 feet to 1,940 feet. And this little topo map I put in here, this is also from the application, but I thought it just did a pretty good job at conveying the difference in the surface elevation. So I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but you can see just the existing outline of the reservoir as it exists right now. And then this blue line here that goes around it is the proposed surface elevation. And so this was in the last slide, but the existing elevation right now is 7,282 feet, and the proposed is 7,406 feet above mean sea level. And so basically this area in between the current perimeter and this blue line is essentially going to be underwater. And so I think my understanding of what this adverse impact is, basically the land surrounding the reservoir right now is going to be gone. And I added in a couple just engineering drawings of the dam. I thought this was kind of an interesting perspective. And so the dam is going to be about 130 feet higher, and then the dam crest is going to be 790 feet longer. And then again, this is just another kind of perspective. This is a centerline profile of the dam. And so you can see it's a little hard to see, but this dotted line here is the dam crest, the current dam crest. And then this solid line here is going to be the proposed dam crest. And then you can see on the sides, that dotted line is the existing ground. And then the solid line below it is the approximate foundation excavation. And so essentially, I think what these previous slides have been showing, the adverse impacts to the dam and the reservoir, essentially just because they're building on to the dam and they're expanding the actual reservoir itself. I think basically the cultural and historic integrity of these resources is essentially going to be lost through the construction. And so the other resource that would be adversely impacted is the resumption flume. And I actually was not able to find anything specific in the application materials that detailed what exactly is happening to the resumption flume. I'm assuming it's likely going to be destroyed, but again, maybe the applicant or staff are here that can clarify that. But basically this flume just runs along the cliff above the canyon of South Boulder Creek. and it's really deteriorated. It's obviously not in use right now, but it basically consists of a about 5-foot wooden trestle, and there's some wooden braces that are built out from the face of the cliff. And in the cultural survey, they found that the flume may be associated with operations of a nearby Alonzo Cohen resumption placer, which was patented in 1896. And other than that, they didn't find any other historical documentation. And I just saw a comment that parts of it will be inundated. So thank you for that. And I just added in some pictures of the dam and the reservoir. This is from 2008. And we do have some historic pictures of construction of the dam back from the early 1950s, which is pretty cool. 1955. Okay. And this brings me just back to the standard of approval that I had highlighted in the previous slides. So basically what this standard of approval is doing is it's seeking for us to evaluate basically whether or not the loss of these significant cultural resources from this project is reasonable or not. And that's ultimately going to be up to the decision-making bodies, Board of County Commissioners. But what we're asking is that HPAB consider this project, the impact it has on these cultural resources, the mitigation plans they have in effect, and just provide any comments they have on that. And so our historic preservation staff, Jessica and Denise, have also reviewed this application and provided their comments. And so they've come up with 2 conditions of approval. And so the first one is that they're going to require the applicant to provide the county with a copy of all documentation included in the signed programmatic agreement, which would include the HAIR documentation and the historic properties management plan. And the second condition of approval is that the applicant install some sort of signage on site related to the history of the dam and the flume for public education. And so with that, I'm happy to try and answer any questions, or if you guys have any comments, concerns, recommendations. And again, I know this was a lot of information, but also maybe lacking some information. So you're more than welcome to review these materials after tonight at another time, and send either Jessica or Denise your comments if you have any. But I'm happy to take any questions or comments now. So thank you.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question first. I read through it fairly quickly because there's a lot to go through, but I did not see any mention of a monitor being on site. Is that in the EIS? Or is it part of the programmatic agreement?
That I am unsure of. I don't know.
I would think that if things are going to be lost forever, it'd be good to have someone out that could, keep an eye on things as the work is progressing. I mean, it does have the, the standard stipulations about uncovering if you find something or if you find a body or all this other stuff. But I didn't see any mention of like a monitor.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, I don't recall seeing that in the PA either. So I'll take note of that and see if there is something like that in the agreement. And if not, we can definitely take note of that.
One question I had, so I know we're asking them to add interpretive signs for the resources that are going to be destroyed. Typically, when you make those signs, it's like at the site of what was lost. And I'm curious if we've made any recommendation or thought about where the signage is going to be, since obviously the site of where they normally would be is not going to be accessible.
For scuba divers, I think.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I know that Denise and Jessica were discussing that a bit, but I don't think they came to any final agreement on that. I think they had mentioned maybe have some sort of signage in the parking lot or if there's recreational trails around, something like that. So that's definitely something I think we would love to hear from you guys if you had any recommendations on location of signage.
I mean, I like it. The idea of having it on a trail, like close by to where the area is. I don't think it has to be right where it was previously, but I think it should be somewhere that is somewhat accessible. But yeah, I like the idea of a trail.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to add that I wonder if we can suggest that the content and location of the signage could be reviewed by either HPAB or staff, just so, I mean, there's a huge variety in what those interpretive panels sometimes look like and sometimes how good or bad they are. So it'd be great if we could get some, maybe at least a staff approval of their location and the content.
I'd also like to comment, I'm glad to see that the SHPO office worked with the Corps when they came up with the APE. But one thing I did also notice was they're going to do a class 3 survey of the area. And it said either the Corps would do it or a contractor would do it. Do you know if they're going to do it themselves or if they're going to pick a contractor for the project? Or it'd almost be good to have a contractor do it, someone outside from the, away from the agency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I'm not sure of, but that's definitely something we could ask the applicant. And it looks like Travis said a contractor would likely be used. Thank you, Travis.
I also read that there were some tribes and the Boulder County Historic Preservation Board were invited to sign the PA's concurring parties. I was unclear if that was already asked for in 2017 or that we are signing it now. But do you know if the HPAB actually did sign, if that happened in the past?
I'm unsure of that. Well,
so can I jump in? This is Travis.
Yeah.
Instead of typing it all out, we invited Boulder County and the tribes. Well, the Corps did, and also FERC invited the county and the tribes to sign on to the PAs, both of them, and they never heard anything back. So the signatories off the top of my head are the Forest Service, Denver Water, FERC, and the Corps. The tribes were interested, but when they found out the actual location was up in the canyon, they were no longer interested because they weren't as worried about burial sites and other artifacts because of the predominance of bedrock in the area.
Got it.
So someone reached back out to them, or was it just they didn't respond in 30 days and then you assumed that there was nothing going on?
The Corps spent almost a year reaching out to the tribes. So they gave them multiple chances to comment on multiple drafts. One of the tribes did come back and say, hey, we're interested. But once they found out, like I said, where it was, and they were like, never mind. So they were given multiple opportunities to sign on.
Do you know which tribe that was?
No, I don't. I'll write a note and I'll send it to you tomorrow. It's in the Corps' record.
Thank you.
What about Boulder County Historic Preservation Board? I think you said you reached out and never heard back on them, from them?
Correct. Boulder County was asked to sign the agreement as well, and nothing was ever, there was no response. Denver Water always assumed, and it could be a bad assumption, that the reason Boulder County didn't want to sign on was because they're waiting for the 1041 process.
Got it.
What's the significance of Boulder County HPAB signing it? Take it you can't hear me.
I have no idea. They were just asked as a cooperating agency if they would like to sign on. It may not be cooperating, consulting, whatever the term is. I'm not sure the exact ramifications for either side, other than Boulder County was asked to be a signatory.
They probably see us as a stakeholder and they just wanted to, ask us to get everyone on board, I guess.
And maybe I can jump in. This is Dale Case, Director of Community Planning and Permitting, on some of the process behind this and I think as Travis mentioned, his assumption that the county is waiting for the 1041 process, and that's correct. There hasn't been the information in the EIS and in other places that really address a lot of our local concerns and our local issues that we have. And so signing agreements and moving forward on that prior to it coming through our process was premature. Before, and we could ask for information that would kind of get us to some of things that may be of local concern that aren't of state or national concern from a historic standpoint. And so trying to get that in these in our local review process is an important piece of this. And so that's why we haven't signed it at this point.
So the 1041 hasn't happened yet.
That's the process that it's going through right now, is our Article 8 process 1041, as we call it.
So thank you for that clarification, Dale. I was hoping you would jump in. So I think a little bit of what, from my personal perspective, what HPAB would do at this point is probably monitor a lot of this, and it's not, in my view, appropriate for us to take other action other than making recommendations up the chain to the county commissioners.
Yeah, and I think that's the case. And I think if there's pieces of this that you feel you would like more information on, the ideas of moving forward with the additional signage and locations and or additional consultations that you think are necessary based on the area, I think those are all things that we want to sound off you as our advisory board for ideas or thoughts that we can then go to Denver Water and work towards resolving, so that we're trying to address all the issues that have to do with cultural and historic relevance.
Is the lead agency the Corps?
So this is
Denver.
This is
I bet it's Denver Water, right?
so through our process, it's Denver Water is the applicant for the 1041 process, and that is who we will work with the Corps, and the Corps process. The 401 process is a different process than the federal process, and we've been waiting for it to come through our local review to be able to look at it based on our code criteria, our specific code criteria.
So again, I think that the comments that have been made so far by board members are excellent, and I would concur with those. I think that personally, I think that the county staff, Denise and Jessica's recommendations were good. I think, in my view, I would like to suggest that we have perhaps a bit more beyond that, and to, I believe, Marissa's point, some recommendation ability as to where these sort of signs are placed, because clearly this is a huge impact on the existing system. Essentially, as I see it, it's a complete rebuild. So it's a new project that replaces the old, assuming this all goes forward.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it would be okay for us to, throughout the application, keep the board in the loop with any, if they have sort of preliminary plans for locations and what the signs are going to look like, we could get those reviewed by either you guys or Denise and Jessica for approval.
So it would be my recommendation then that HPAB follow that process. I believe that most of us have total confidence in Denise and Jessica's review. And I would suggest then that some of this, as it moves forward, presuming it follows the path that it looks like it's following, a lot of that can certainly be done by email. Since we're not an approval agency anyhow, merely a recommendation or recommending board, a lot of that can be done fairly informally with Denise and Jessica and ultimately Dale Case as being the formal presenters up the chain, if you would. Please feel free to object to that if you don't agree, but that would be my recommendation.
And I feel we don't really have the information right now to make those kind of decisions. And when I looked at the mapping on the PA, I found it ambiguous as to what the extent of the project was going to be. So I think we're still a little short on information here.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, one thing I was going to say, I think we have, or at least I felt like I had adequate information about the resources that were going to be significantly impacted by the process, but I didn't. There were more sites that I think the survey found that weren't included, and my assumption is that it's because they won't be impacted, but there may be some potential low impact to those. So I would like to know a little bit more about those other sites to find out, what is their current situation, so we would be more adequately able to comment if in the future we knew about those sites, and if there are going to be future impacts to that, or as part of this process they're disturbed, we could make a more informed comment on those other sites.
I agree with Marissa. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I agree with Marissa on that. And there were a number of detailed, including photographic evidence of sites that would be disturbed, but nowhere, unless you guys can point it out to me, I didn't see an overall map of the proposed extents of the new reservoir, which is going to be greatly enlarged, and where those points of impact would be. And I guess I'm kind of a map guy, but I would like a little more information about that. And as Chuck said, yeah, we're not in control of the project, but it would be good to see a little bit more refined information so that at least we could, be aware of where these points of impact are relative to the expanded limits of the project.
Okay, yeah, I think that's something we could request.
So this is Travis. I'll jump in real quick again. The reason we don't map it is the Corps doesn't show those things, so the public doesn't go out and find them. So it's this balance of preserving cultural resources spots, but also you don't want to mark it so everybody can easily go find it and damage it or take stuff from it. So that's why you don't have an exact map of where the resumption flume is because of that. They're trying to keep it hidden, so to speak. But we know where the dam is, but the resumption flume is not marked.
Well, in our packet on page 64, there is the area of potential effect marked in a red boundary. I think it's comforting knowing that SHPO had a hand in that because, I'm sure they would know more about the resources out there than, well, except the stuff that's not uncovered, but that they would make good judgment on that.
And the area of potential effects right there, is that including the area that might be affected by the construction process as well as by the reservoir expansion?
From what the EIS said, it did say that included staging areas, turnarounds, and all that. That's part of the construction process.
That's correct. Yes, everything in the red line was evaluated as far as construction related, but everything inside the red line will not be impacted necessarily by the construction activities.
Well, I think I would concur, I think, with what Marissa is saying, which is this is an opportunity to take a look at those sites that may not be immediately impacted and to be proactive about those. I think that at least ought to be assessed and see if there's a significant number of sites and what their quality looks like that beyond just the impacted ones.
Yeah, I agree with Mark and Marissa as well.
Yeah, and I think referral comments are due, I want to say November 13th. And so
That's correct.
You guys have time to look through the application materials. I can put a link in the chat to the county's website with the application materials as well, if you wanted to look through that too and provide comments at a later time.
But wouldn't the class 3 survey basically look at all those sites? I mean, they're going to look at the entire area potential effect.
Was that a question for me?
No, it's kind of a follow-up, you know. It is a concern for all the sites, potential sites that could be out there, but the class 3 should uncover some of that, but also having a monitor on site is extremely important, especially on a project where you know automatically you're losing stuff. Because if you lose stuff, you know, you have to document if you know it's going to be destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So I've heard several very pertinent comments. I'm not sure exactly how to put this together as a formal thing. I know that it's been recorded and that staff people will be looking at our comments. Does any board member have a specific motion that they would like to make? If so, if you could do that, I would appreciate it.
If I might interject here for just a quick minute, Hannah Hipley, Long Range Planning Manager. I don't necessarily know that we need a motion from the board at this point in time. I think as staff, we can collect the comments that we heard from you today, put those in writing and maybe send them back out to you to make sure that we've captured your thoughts.
That's fine. And if there's no objection from other board members, we'll go with that.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, that's a good idea, I think.
So I would agree with that. So at this point, I would close the discussion of docket SI-20-0003, the Gross Reservoir Dam expansion from a cultural resources standpoint. So let's consider that closed and move on to the last item, which if we want to take the time tonight, considering that it's 7:45, we could discuss the NAPC conference, which 4 of us attended. It's my personal opinion that it could probably be handled better informally, and I would defer to staff's opinion on that.
So we do have to report on this by the end of the calendar year. We are anticipating having a meeting in December, but there is a chance we won't. So that's why it was on the agenda for tonight.
Understood. I guess at this point, we should probably do at least a quick snapshot of opinions from those that attended, and hopefully that would meet the requirement. Personally, I found it quite interesting. Could I give you a whole report on what every presenter said? Not a chance. I did feel that a lot of what Boulder County is doing is kind of in the middle, or the upper middle, if you would, of the folks that were there. I found a couple of things stood out to me. The lead prologue, if you would, speaker was quite the statistician, and he spent a whole lot of time talking about economic impact. And the bottom line was that in my view, was that adaptive reuse worked. The other thing that I found interesting was that Houston, I believe I'm remembering that right without looking at my notes, has a warehouse of reclaimed materials, so that if you have a destroyed door or something, or somebody replaced it with an aluminum thing, you could go and find one that was appropriate and put it in. And this was essentially like a swap shop rather than a profit-making deal. So I thought that was very interesting as well. So those were kind of my comments. And let's see, who else was attending? Larry, okay, that's right. I'm sorry, my memory is not always the greatest. I guess I would entertain your comments then.
Yeah, I think it's best to do it now too. My memory's slipping away the further I get away from those videos. I guess my general impression of the whole thing was it didn't really fit into my experiences being on a board. A lot of what they were talking about seemed to be more from the professional side, something that Denise would do, or the staff that works with Denise would do. So a lot of it didn't seem really relevant to a lot of my experience from being on this board. Went to, I think, 10 or 11 of the sessions, and only 2 really kind of resonated with me. One was about the Confederate monuments and the controversy around the Confederate monuments. I know we don't deal with Confederate monuments in Boulder County, but you can take it as a learning lesson when you're approaching some sort of controversial project. How do you handle that? And remember, trying to keep things in context of the concept of public memory and the way we create public memory. So I thought that was a great session, but the most relevant session that I listened in on was the one about the standards. It was about the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And it was great. They had 2 presenters. They would show a project and they would go point, counterpoint, like one was for it, one was against it. And they would talk, then they would take a poll for all the people in the audience. What would you do? Approve it or not approve it? And it was completely split every time. It just proves to you that this is not a science. This is, you're approaching this from whatever you have in your background and the way you're interpreting those standards. So for me, it's like, I wish we could do, like, I know no one wants to do those tests again, but some sort of, little, let's see if we can calibrate and get on the same page on some of these projects, but I think that was probably the best experience I had during the conference, was that one, because, a lot of times you sit and wring your hands, should that apply? Because they not only did like full rehabilitation, but just changing material, like, substituting material. Does it work? Does it not work? Is it appropriate? Is it not appropriate? And they got into the minutia of it. So anyway, that's kind of my general observation. Hopefully that was enough.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I thought that was very interesting to see the percentages of people. And, I'm a bit of a centrist on this stuff anyhow, and I found myself kind of agreeing down the middle. I thought some of them went way one way and way the other. But the fortunate thing to me was that generally a consensus was reached. And I think we do that here with our group pretty much.
But there was the one project in San Francisco where they basically took this one building, I think it had been used for as a parking garage, and basically just saved the facade of the building, took out all the internal structure, and then built like these huge new apartments on the backside of it. And you're thinking, there's no way that's going to meet the criteria. San Francisco approved it, so.
Yeah, I thought that one was pretty far out myself, but I actually, and I forget where it was now again, memory, but on one of the National Trust tours that I went on, they essentially built a new building juxtaposed with an existing building. So it was a very clear separation between them, but it was kind of a new and an old. And I thought that was a better approach than the one that you mentioned, which was you got to be kidding me. You knocked everything down except the storefront. So anyhow, there was a lot of that, and I found it interesting. But I totally agree with your point that a lot of it was more of a professional staff persons. But it was very interesting to me that we run the gamut of people that have almost virtually no historic preservation to ones that are very, very strict, and a very strict application is Aspen, Colorado, where they have a whole manual. And if you're going to be a contractor that has to work on the historic building, before you can get the building permit, you have to show that you took their class. So that was kind of to the other side. And I see Jessica is nodding, and so I sense that you got the same feeling.
Yeah, they're very strict there, and I just don't know how they do it. It seems like it would be, I don't know, like herding cats.
So in any event, that was kind of my impressions. I thought it was well worthwhile, but I'm not sure that I would try to teach any more of that. You kind of have to listen to it for yourself. I don't know, Larry, I sense that you sort of agree.
Yeah, I do. It was, I mean, it's great. You get all sorts of pointers and you can hear different people's perspectives. And I think that was great. But other than the one really about the standards, not a lot that I feel like I could apply directly in what we do here. So.
Yeah.
And that was my sense too, from the sessions I attended. I thought that that our state conference actually is a lot more meaningful than the national one.
Yeah, the local one is head and shoulders above the general, but in their defense, we have a perhaps more narrow focus.
Sure.
So so that's kind of question then. Does that meet our requirements for
what you needed to do tonight? Yeah, it does. We just needed to have you guys report to the board about a little bit about what you learned at the conference. So yeah, now we can get reimbursed. So
okay. I want to make sure that we met the point, because I think in the broader perspective that all of us that went will probably remember that and apply it as we move forward where it's appropriate. Certainly I will.
Great, thank you.
So is there any other old business we should cover?
I don't have anything else.
So hearing none, I will adjourn the November 5th meeting of the Historic Preservation Advisory Board. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Ready?